All right, welcome everyone. Nice to see some familiar names on the attendee list that are in, and I see others are continuing to join. But let's make a start with the introduction, and others will have joined by the time we get into the discussion itself. So just want to say a big welcome to today's webinar. For those who don't know me, my name is Daniel Porus, and I'm Chief Commercial Officer at legal transaction management provider Legatics. And what we're wanting to explore today, in today's rapidly evolving legal landscape, leveraging legal tech solutions can be instrumental in ensuring a law firm's competitive edge. However, choosing the right vendor is so important to support your firm's legal tech journey. And as I'm sure you're acutely aware, choosing the wrong one can be incredibly detrimental. The right vendor should be a strategic partner, not just a supplier. A good vendor should collaborate with you, provide robust support, and demonstrate its ability to continue to grow and innovate alongside your firm. Today's webinar features expert panelists from leading law firms and legal tech vendors, with the aim of providing some useful insights that you can hopefully use when selecting your next legal technology provider. So, introducing our panelists. Giving the law firm perspective, we have Jonathan Troost, who is Law and Tax Technology Manager at leading international law and tax firm Loyens and Loeff. We have Andrei Salajan, who is Head of Digitalisation at leading full-service firm Schoenherr. And giving the vendor perspective, we have David Howorth, who is co-founder and director at next generation document automation provider Avvoka, and Nathan Killick, who is Head of Business Development at Microsoft-backed legal tech company Definely. So we're going to dive into the discussion and we'll be saving time at the end for Q&A, but please do use the Q&A tool that we have within Zoom to submit any questions that you have. Some of the panelists, if they're not speaking at the time, may respond to some of those in writing as we're going through, but we will be saving time at the end to go through as many of your questions as possible. So going into our first discussion topic, we are keen to talk about understanding needs when it comes to thinking about what legal technology solutions to bring into a firm. So I think speaking to asking you, Jonathan and Andrei, how do you identify some of the specific challenges and requirements that legal tech should address your law firm? Can you give us a bit of a sense as to how you think about that? Maybe Jonathan to start with.
Thanks, Daniel. It's a pleasure being here. Yeah, in terms of challenges, as a firm, we have set up an innovation process 3.5 years ago. It is 3 stages, and everything starts with a problem. So it's a problem first definition. And it's simple. The vendors who are able to help us creating value in terms of solutions who could support our business processes are the right vendors we are working with. So it could be numerous solutions, all in support of our business processes.
Thank you, Jonathan. Andrei?
Yeah, I think that's very important, right? You mentioned it, Jonathan. Everything needs to start with the pain point, right, and with the problem. So you first really need to dive into that, and I think for that you really need obviously also process like you have. We also have an innovation forum and process here within Schoenherr where we try to scope these things out and obviously discuss new ideas and innovation. But I think as a legal tech department, you really need to be close to your teams as well and to the business and understand it. And I think this is quite abstract. It's probably not that easy to achieve, but I think this is very important for law firms, and we try to do that here. So we work very close with our legal teams to really see what their pain point is.
Thanks, Andrei. Can you describe some examples of vendors who you've collaborated with that have demonstrated that they really understood your needs well, and what the process looked like working with these vendors?
Yeah, well, maybe I'll drift a bit away from that, but I think that's quite an interesting discussion, and I think it suits. It's a good story, and it suits very well the current topic, right? And also Legatics as a transaction management and deal solution. But we basically in this area identified the problem quite early on, right? As I mentioned, stick close to the problem, and we developed our own solution in-house, our own transaction management platform. This was a couple of years ago. And fast forward, we obviously decided, we that solved a particular pain point within our banking finance practice group and was super tailored for financing transactions and managing CP checklists. But we quickly noticed, first of all, we're not a software provider. Secondly, the legal tech market evolved a lot since we did that. We did that, and a couple of years ago, we were working a lot with startups, and we had within the Legal Tech Hub a venture that we funded here in Vienna. We developed solutions together and went this route of building our own solutions. That is nowadays, I mean, it becomes, but we don't want to drift into that. It becomes relevant again with the whole AI topic, but maybe we discussed that a bit at the end. But we wanted we knew exactly what we needed, so our requirements were super clear, and we needed to find a solution for that, right? So that was very interesting, and we really tested everything that's on the market. And this ties in with what you are asking, right? We had very good picture, and I think that's super important of what you need. And then you really need to dive deep and test the solutions and discuss with the vendors and see how you can manage that pain point first, right? And then I think it becomes quite clear which way you want to go, right? And that was what we did, for example, to solve transaction management, right? We tested everything. We tested big solutions. We tested Legatics. We tested multiple stuff. And at the end, it boils down to, obviously, there's a trust relationship and a lot of other aspects that factor into a decision. But for us, for example, with transaction management, it came down to a simple, quite particular technicality. We needed super flexibility in the workflow around the statuses of the CP checklist, right? So quite technical and quite specific. But that was basically the prerequisite to even look at something further, right? And so that impacted our decision quite a lot. So yeah. Really dive into testing solutions. I think that's super important.
That's great, thank you. And I'd love to dive a bit deeper into sort of the whole build versus buy approach and maybe some lessons from that. But maybe Jonathan, before we go into that a little bit, any further comments to add or examples from your perspective?
Yeah, indeed. So I fully agree on what Andrei shared. I think what is good to add here is that if you look at the solution, you can have all your requirements set and do a deep dive and find the problem solution fit. It is truly about the deep understanding how the solution would fit in the work process. So you have your prerequisites in advance, you do your pilots, you see, you validate your assumptions. And at the same time, if you implement it, it's becoming change within your firm. So the vendors we love to work with is the vendors who stay with us. We do regular check-ins with vendors, help the vendors understanding the needs of all the practices of Loyens and Loeff, and make sure that our journey doesn't have a start only, but it's a continuous journey, giving each other feedback, co-creating on how to make sure we get the most out of our technologies.
That's great. And I'm going to move over to get a more of the vendor perspective in a moment. But while we're on that topic of sort of buy versus, build yourself versus buy externally, maybe Andrei, to come back to you, what's your experience been having built something yourself and then move to sort of for a similar problem going externally? How do you feel that's worked?
Well, I think first of all, it gives you a very good insight into actually, and Jonathan, you mentioned this, right? I mean, you have requirements, but then you also know how it fits into your workflow, right? And how it fits into your business process, your legal advice, right? For us, it was an external client-facing solution, obviously managing transactions, so you have the clients in there straight away, so that's quite an important part. So it needs to work, and so I think building your own solution, you have a very clear picture of what that needs to be, and obviously you also need to be a bit prepared to do a bit of compromise, or maybe take a lot of other features, for example, that for us were super important, that we didn't build our own in our solution. For example, I mentioned, it was super tailored to banking finance use cases, but I was getting a lot of requests from other practice groups. I was getting requests from real estate, from M&A deals with a bit of a different structure. So we needed more flexibility in the platform, right? So it's always a give and take. The new solution and what we tested was maybe a bit different for banking finance, or they needed to adjust just a slight bit, but it opened a whole other use case and universe for a lot of other practice groups. So it's always a give and take, but I think it's super important, and you mentioned it, Jonathan, as well, right? Go along the journey with us, right? I think development, and I think we have this on the agenda as well, Daniel, but I think that's super important, right? So even though some features are not there from the beginning, I think you'll get a very good feeling from the start if it's just something that the vendor is not interested into developing, or if they really understand your needs and translate your feedback into development. That's super important for us, and I think that's a key part when selecting vendors.
That's great. And yes, we will cover towards the end the topic of kind of assessing the future looking aspect from a vendor perspective. But just while we're on the topic of needs, getting maybe the perspective from you, David and Nathan. Obviously, as legal technology providers, we'd be advocating for the buying something externally. And I know certainly one of the benefits I've seen from speaking to others is, a customer of ours will get the benefit not just of all their feedback, but feedback from all the other peer firms, and that then goes into the roadmap of what you're building. But it can be difficult, right, when different both existing and prospective customers are giving different feedback. How do you guys think about that when sort of communicating, that you understand the customer's needs or prospective customers' needs, and actually thinking about what you're developing from a product perspective?
Yeah, I'm happy to say that one first, Daniel. Yeah, it is super difficult, and I think it gets harder as you grow and you get more clients. I think in the early days, when you have a small number and you can do things very quickly, you can put a button there, you can do this, you can do that. But as you grow and scale, it becomes much more challenging. I mean, our approach is that we have a really open forum between the whole company around any feedback or any request clients are getting. So people will share all the time, hey, I heard this feedback from this client. Has anyone had anything similar? I heard this feedback from this client. And actually, for us, what we try and do really is try and understand, the clients will often phrase it as, oh, I wish this button would do this, or can you just put something here? And I think what we need to really try and do is kind of be the kind of almost thinking what they're actually trying to get it to do, rather than what they actually are asking for. And so what we always try and do is we'll regularly build things, but we'll try and do it in a way that satisfies many clients. And I think that becomes harder and harder. But I think also it's important to keep doing that, because I think, as all of us, legal technology vendors here, we're in the kind of, not startups anymore, but we're also not the kind of 30, 40-year-old companies. And I think one of our key competitive advantages is the ability to develop quickly and stay ahead of the competition, and also to make sure that our clients are feeling like they're being listened to and the product is evolving. So I think it's a difficult challenge, but I think we're always thinking we need to keep making sure we do that and not lose some of that agility perhaps as we scale. But it's definitely a tough challenge.
Thanks, David. Nathan, anything to add?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, actually. And one of the things that certainly experienced over the years are vendors that are turning around and saying, yes, we can do whatever it is you want. And I think it takes a really mature organization to be able to turn around and say, look, where are we going to spread ourselves? Are we going to diversify too much? Are we going to end up, trying to be one of these much larger software houses that is just going to either develop everything or buy everything? One of the things we try to do is stay true to, being the best of breed in what it is exactly that we do. Constantly receiving feedback from lots of different end users and business ops teams that actually sometimes you need to take a step back, and as David said, you need to really understand where that desire is coming from. And actually sometimes your product already does that. but it's just a case of, you know, re-educating or repositioning, you know, what it is exactly that feature is, or whatever. So, and that comes early on in that discovery process. You know, what are those real needs that have been predetermined, and how are we delivering against that? And I think measuring success, and I think measuring success will come into all of the topic points of today, but you know, I think what law firms and you know, in-house counsels, for example, need to be able to do is they need to be confident that the vendor can deliver on, you know, measuring the success and delivering that back, because that's not only important in a pilot or, you know, in initial conversations, it's also really important as the relationship continues over the contract lifecycle, right? So yeah, I agree with a lot of what David and Andrei and Jonathan have said there.
That's great. Thanks, Nathan. So we'll maybe stick with the vendor. Oh, sorry, Jonathan, did you have something to add?
No, so I love the connection Nathan made between what the solution is delivering, but also how, because you can have an outcome, but it's really how the solution fits into the business processes and the deep understanding of the customer, of the vendor, which really moves the needle. So you can have beautiful solutions, but if you cannot fit it in the work process, it simply doesn't make sense.
Great, thanks, Jonathan. So just maybe sticking with the vendor perspective for a moment. We know, you know, when a prospective customer is considering a solution, they're doing usually a degree of research, like understanding what's on the market, and figuring out what's going to be compatible with their systems, their needs. How, as vendors, do you, Nathan and David, communicate with your prospects about credibility and sort of inform about compatibility?
I guess, you know, going quickly from our side, one of the things that I've certainly learned over the years through trial and error is understanding not just who the stakeholders are, but actually what does the solution or what does the process actually mean to that specific stakeholder, right? You know, we've all got a job to do, and you know, my goals in an organization are going to be different to somebody else's in the department. So our job, for example, is to not just understand what Andrei's need is going to be, but also, you know, who's going to be rolling out this deployment, and then, you know, what information is nested and embedded behind that. So, you know, systems that are currently in place, versionings that are in place, other tools that are being used, right? We need to know what other tools are being used, because a lot of the time what law firms, you know, can easily get sucked into are the bells and whistles, right? And the bright and shiny things of a solution. But actually, you know, and I think this has been learned over the years, when you purchase a solution and you get, say, you know, 6 months, 12 months down the line, you start to see some crossover with other things that you've already got. And you've got people, you know, it's what we used to call shadow IT when you're talking IT solutions, is end users would just go and do something completely random to get around the actual, you know, feature that was bought to solve the issue in the first place. And I'm sure we're all familiar with that. So, and being able to bring in every single stakeholder and talk their language throughout each step of the process, I think is really important for achieving that.
Thanks, Nathan. David?
Yeah, no, echo everything that Nathan said. And I think just thinking about it from another angle, the thing that we always are really acutely aware of, and maybe at times struggle with, is that, you know, your prospective buyer has done 90% of their research before they even speak to you. And actually, you know, every single legal tech tool in the world will say they can do everything that they, you know, they'll basically say they can do whatever they want on the website. And one of the real difficulties on it from a product is that how do you actually differentiate yourself on a website, on demo videos, you know, before the clients even had the chance to speak to you and have those in-person conversations? Because, you know, we all know that the first thing everyone does is they Google things, they talk to people, and they've already made their shortlist before they even had the chance to ask you, do you actually do this? Does your product integrate with this? So actually, I agree with everything Nathan said, and I just think, you know, one thing that we're always aware of, and, you know, we could even get, you know, hopefully much better at is thinking about all the different personas, but then how do you make sure that each persona that's going to come look at your website finds something for them? You know, how can you say the same thing to 10 different people on one page? And there's no easy solution. I think it only gets harder and harder as more vendors appear and more people say they can do things. And, you know, one person's no code is another person's very code, you know, and it's difficult to kind of at times really articulate and show your differentials, I think, on a site before you even get the chance to speak to someone. So yeah, it's something we're acutely aware of. The buying process is often taking place before you even get that email or that response.
Yeah.
So we've heard the vendor perspective. I'd love to hear the sort of the vendor client perspective view. Like, does that align? Like, do you, maybe just to get some initial thoughts, and I'll dive into it a bit deeper.
Yeah, well, I have a question to that I'm just thinking out loud here. It might be a bit funny question, but I think I mean it also can be a challenge. But do you think as legal tech vendors, obviously, and solution providers, do you think you're really in a super fortunate position, because most of the or we can also twist the question: are there still a lot of clients or firms that come into discussions with you that don't have a clue about the solutions that they're trying to implement? Because at least for us, exactly what you mentioned, David, right? We do a lot of research because before coming into these things, and if we, I don't know, we're talking about transaction management here, and we're talking about document automation, right? And document tools and defined. So these are there's, like you mentioned, a lot of other tools there, and probably coming into a discussion, we've tested other, I don't know, 10 things, and we've probably had something internally, or we're switching from some other solution. So I guess the buyer, right, is actually should be super knowledgeable. At least we try to be. So are there still funny differences from or deviations from that, or is that a challenge in itself, because you'd have to deal with people that basically know everything before going into these discussions? Or
Yeah, honestly, it's such an interesting point, and actually that has genuinely been the case for years. I mean, even if you think about, when people buy a mobile phone nowadays, right, everyone knows what phone they go in, and then they demand the phone that they want, right? Rarely does someone go in and go, I don't know what phone to buy, can you just talk me through these 100 phones that we see? So our job, is to listen to exactly what it is the client believes that they know, right? And actually a lot of the time that might be correct, and you go, do you know what, you've done half my job for me, that's brilliant. But actually you need to rely on the vendor to not only have such a deep understanding of their own products, services, etc., how they sit, and that's part of this understanding your environment, right? And understanding our own discovery is to look at it and go, well, hang on a second, you're talking about doing this, but actually you've either got something that already kind of does that, or hang on a second, what was wrong with doing it that way in the first place? So it is our job to challenge you to an extent, but actually when you collaborate and you give each other the time of day to listen to what it is the client has gone and researched and understood themselves, but also for the client to be able to sit back and go, I'm engaging with these vendors because they are the most knowledgeable people around this specific product, service, etc. And I think it's really about that. I don't think it's not a one-sided relationship, and I think anyone will tell you that. If I came in and I said to you, this product will do every single thing that you want it to do, the silver bullet, you're soon going to find out that that's not the case. And then if we talk about the legal sector, private practice specifically for a second, word travels fast. So it's only the the well-respected and the honest vendors that you see with any longevity in the market. I don't know, David, if you agree with that.
No, I agree completely, Nathan, and also Andrei as well. Yeah, informed buyers are by far the best, and I think it's for us to make sure. I think one of the key things we can all do is let you know our limitations as well, because it sounds really cliche, but honestly, kind of if you think we do something and we kind of show you we can half do it, just enough to kind of get by that demo, you're going to hate us 6 months from now, and you're not going to keep to want using it. And I think that's one of the real pressures, because, and we'll come on to AI and everything, I'm sure, no doubt, but these days it's so easy to do a quick demo of something that looks like it'll blow your socks off. And actually, if you scratch below the surface, actually, is it really ready to do the things that it says it? So I think as vendors, hopefully we can try and separate ourselves by being really honest about what our limitations are, so that you're kind of fully informed. But to your earlier point, I completely agree that actually an informed buyer is by far the best one to speak to, because you know exactly what you want, what you don't want. And I guess it's just about us making sure that we're giving you that information readily available before you even need to speak to us. So yeah, I think it's definitely a really good market to sell in, because the people that are buying are clearly normally very well informed.
I think Andrei talked about it early on. Jonathan may have touched on it as well. That idea of building trust, right? It's a relationship of trust between the vendor and the prospective customer, and it's that foundation of what the relationship hopefully is going to look like going forward as well. So Andrei and Jonathan, just to dive a bit deeper into this, we've talked about doing research when it comes to assessing potential solutions. What does that actually look like for you as a firm? If you've identified a particular pain point that you're going after, what research do you do? What materials are useful for you as you're doing that? To what degree is it materials provided by the vendor, other research that you're conducting outside of that? Would love to dive into that a bit deeper.
John, you want to go first?
No, you go ahead.
Should I? Okay. Well, obviously, I mean, I think for me it's quite particular, but I'm super hands-on, and I also come a bit with I'm that guy that speaks both languages. Like, I have an IT background, and I can also understand what the language our legal professionals and partners are speaking. But yeah, no, I want to dive straight into the demo. I just want to see the solution. I'm not interested about. I mean, David, you mentioned it, right? The whole marketing or doing a catchy or a super fancy preview or video or whatever that doesn't show any features, but that shows generically, okay, I can fulfill everything. We all know that. I think that's part of the marketing game here, but no, I just want to see the solution in action in a live demo, and then I want to test it ourselves. And we test a lot of the solutions ourselves, and not to brag here, but we have had several solutions, right, where the solution provider is giving us the solution, and then is kind of, oh wow, you figured this, or can you do, or I'm showing him a feature that maybe not that he doesn't know, but maybe he doesn't have on his mind at the moment or something. So we really want to dive super deep into these things and test ourselves, because as all of you mentioned, and I fully agree with that, right? I think you know your requirements, but it does need to fit in your business process, and you know your teams, you know your stakeholders, you know your partners, or they think you know how to promote these things best also internally. So I think you really need to understand the solution yourself. Otherwise, I don't think it works at least from my point of view in doing really sustainable change and pushing adoption in law firms. I think you need to understand these both sides. And also, just last remark, I think that was super important what you said, David, right? I think adoption is not an easy thing in law firms, right? That we struggle a lot internally with that. So as soon as something like you said comes up, okay, we maybe didn't mention this thing, or this doesn't work along the line or whatever, the relationship is super compromised, because you put in so much effort into pushing and adopting these new workflows and solutions internally as well. So I think, but I think also most legal tech providers I've been in touch with have understood this, right? And I think reputation is super important. So I think this works nowadays. I think, yeah, this should work.
And before just moving over to Jonathan, in terms of materials or support that the vendor can provide in that process, what have you found most useful there?
I think transparency is super important, right? I think that the sooner you can have clear picture of capabilities, but also requirements and also pricing. I think that's super important, because you can have, I don't know, do 5 meetings and look at 5 demos, and then have a completely different pricing expectation, and then start discussing around that, and then not reaching common ground. I think we all run on quite tight and quite efficient budgets for legal tech within law firms. So I think that's also super important. So I think, yeah, transparency and getting quite soon in the process of really seeing the solution live in action. I think for us that's super important.
Thanks, Andrei. Jonathan, your perspective.
Yeah, so same here. We all have tight budgets, so we need to be smart. So we start with the user first. So we start with the pain points. We have an overview of, we have a good understanding of what we need as a firm in support of our business processes. A second step is that we have a good understanding which value those possible solutions could bring to our firm. So it's 5 value drivers: improve user experience, client experience, save money, make money, save time, and reduce risk. Upon that assessment, we go into a dialogue with vendors, but not before we did the exercise use, buy, build. So getting back to the earlier raised point that a lot of solutions had a lot of functionalities, we do first an assessment within our firm, which solutions which are already in our solution stack could be a solution for the pain points addressed. After we have done that exercise, or we have a scouting team full of legal engineers and innovation advisors. They scan the market constantly, looking at the vendors, being as transparent, getting back to Andrei's point, being as transparent as possible in the pilot stage and the pre-engagement stage on what the solution could deliver. So everything a vendor could do to help a law firm understand how a solution is deployed and which value a solution could bring to a specific work process helps us in assessing better and finding the best solution fit for our firm there. And what you see is that if you did the right selection, that the big landscape of legal tech becomes more clearer and clearer. And if you have the overview, you can be more focused on what you actually need there. Yeah.
And maybe then the same question about where the vendor kind of plays into that and any materials or other support. Is there anything in your experience that, where you've seen that vendors have done a good job at that?
Yeah. So it's the understanding of what we need. So it's we are a law firm, security, compliance, how the solutions fit in the solution stack, in the wider firm's architecture, everything vendors share with us to make sure that we have a partner we can trust are critical in that assessment.
Thanks, Jonathan. So one of the things that we've been discussing is the importance of making sure that it's not just a matter of bringing in the right solution, but then once it's in, that it is actually effectively used and deployed, and it doesn't just sit there as shelfware. What, in terms of before actually bringing a solution in, maybe starting with the law firm perspective, how do you determine what that sort of support and deployment is going to be like? So how do you assess that before actually bringing a solution in?
I'd like to have a more streamlined process with that, to be honest. But on the other hand, maybe flexibility is key with that. But I think for us, we're super hands-on with that process as well. And I think often, and I see vendors being more used to that and being quite open to that, but at the beginning a bit skeptic, because obviously I think we need to find, and it's often quite different depending on the solution or the team you're implementing with. But I'm often in a position, to be honest, here at Schoenherr, where I say, okay, I think I need to present a solution, or we need to demo it ourselves, right? And there is always this moment of, okay, but the providers, we also want to stay in control, because obviously you know how to best market and demo your solution. On the other hand, I think in a lot of situations we're pretty much more successful at doing that internally in some specific teams where we know how to pick them up and so on and so forth. And I think it's always, and this is, I think, a very good example again of very good collaboration with the vendors, right? Because I think you need to recognize that together, who has the most assets in a specific deployment and support situation, right? Do you want to let the vendor handle it, or do you want to do it yourself, or there's a mix between both? And I think that needs to be assessed from use case to use case, solution to solution, and that can be quite different. But it's quite often for me funny, because it's that moment where I see a bit of hesitation. No, Andrei, let us demo it. And I'm like, no, I know it's so good. I know how to demo it. Let me demo it. And there's a bit of back and forth. But I'm also the first one to rely on these assets. And obviously our resources are also super limited in terms of time internally. and sometimes it's really not efficient for us to do it, and sometimes you can do it better. So I think it's really a mix of really adapting to the situation.
Any other comments on that, Jonathan? I see.
Yeah. So we co-create with vendors based upon the user, the functional requirements we have from our users or for various business processes. We prepare an assessment, and we prepare where we expect the solution could be in support of our business process. And it's upon the vendor to show the value in support of that business process. So it's really making the connection early days as Loyens and Loeff together with the vendor, understanding the business needs, showing the solution, and getting together there in the early days. So we are pretty strict on understanding everything of the solution itself. And we think it's really important that a vendor plays a part in deploying the solution. So that's why we as well share how after a few months how a solution delivers the value, and where we can adapt, and where we can change our way of working to make sure that we get everything out of the specific solution. And that's where a vendor, of course, is really knowledgeable of, or should be, because they have deployed the solution more in other firms than we did.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Maybe for David and for Nathan, like, how do you think about it in terms of how you communicate to a prospective customer about that post-sale process and what you're going to be doing to support from a vendor perspective, what the relationship is going to look afterwards to make sure that it's a success?
Happy for you to go first, David.
Yeah, I can jump in for a second, Nathan. Yeah, I mean, it's something that everyone's mentioned. It is absolutely key. I think also the type of product that we have, and don't speak on behalf of Nathan, but requires for us, people templating their legal documents. We're a document automation platform, so actually we often have a really, really close relationship with every client, for the first, well, for the whole journey, but there's a particularly close number of touch points over the first few months. That's whether we're helping them with the automation or they're doing it themselves. So for us, we spend a lot of time trying to help put together a really detailed plan in conjunction with the kind of client. So, a roadmap of, okay, well, in order to get your best ROI from us, what templates do you need to have up and running? What do you need to deliver? Who's going to get the most out of it? How many users are going to use this template or this template? So actually for us, we'll often try and put together an actual kind of, timeline Gantt chart or something like that to actually collectively, hold ourselves as a vendor to account as well. That ultimately, if you're not hitting the timelines that you want to, is that our fault? Could we have done more? So I think for us, what we've really learned is that we want to make sure there's a plan in place on day one to make sure that you're hitting what you want to in terms of that return on investment and milestones. So yeah, for us, it's been a learning journey, but making sure that we're really clear collectively, what we both want to achieve in the first 6 or 12 months, and then really do everything we can to help.
So Nathan, maybe a slightly focused question on this. Who do you find are the best stakeholders to engage with to ensure that the deployment is going to be as successful as possible, as soon as possible after making the sale, that you don't end up, 3 months with it just sitting there working out everything that happens afterwards? Or, who are the different stakeholders? Because they are sometimes different, right, in the sales process versus afterwards.
You must have read my mind, because I think in terms of, we're all speaking a great game here, right? We've all got these processes that we've learned over the years, and Andrei and Jonathan have, had various experiences of where they've achieved and potentially not achieved and learned lessons in the past. I think we can have great processes from the vendor perspective and from, Andrei's and Jonathan's side. The key stakeholders are the end users that are going to be using the thing. If regardless of whether we've got a great process and we've put together, statement of works, and we've got adoption strategies and all that kind of stuff, it's so important that the expectation is set from day one with those end users. And, you know, I don't know if this comes down to how the law firm or the client incentivize those end users. You know, obviously you need to make sure that those pilot champions are, you know, bought into the idea of the pilot, let alone the solution. The idea that, yes, you will have to set aside a bit of time, you know, each week to actually give us some feedback. And do you know what? I think, you know, if you find the right kind of solutions and you have the right engaged, you know, people within or end users within the firm, you know, process can fail a little bit, but it's those end users that will pick it up and drive that forward themselves. And I'll give a very quick example. We started working with a top AM law firm last quarter, who, you know, we spent a lot of time talking about how we're going to, you know, ensure adoption, not just throughout the pilot, but ongoing and moving forward. And honestly, one of the things that we did that worked really well was we engaged directly with the lawyers, you know, at the given grace by the business ops team. And the approach was, hey, look, we're exploring this. There's a load of lawyers that are already interested in exploring this. Business ops have given us their grace. We're obviously very sensitive about how we approach those individuals. We do a lot of research as to who we believe, you know, is going to see the most value. We're lucky that we have a product that really does sing to a specific pain point that lawyers have had for years that we can solve. Because then what you get is you get a bunch of people on a pilot that know the tool, love the tool, understand what the expectations are. And then, you know, you've got people that are going to either be the trainers or going to be doing their own lunch and learns, you know, on their department lunch meetings every month or so. High level answer, those end users they are the key stakeholders. You know, if you're talking process about getting the actual technology deployed, so obviously, you know, you're going across IT, compliance, risk, procurement, you know, but to be honest, that's a whole nother ball game.
So I 100% agree with you, Nathan. How do you think about it when that sometimes it's great when the law firms are open to taking that approach and having that collaborative, direct contact relationship with the end lawyers, but quite often, understandably, they're protective of that. How do you navigate it when that is the case, when you actually don't, you're dealing with other stakeholders?
Very interesting question. To be honest, it comes down to how, you know, for us, it comes down to how we approach the prospect in the first place. You know, what we tend to do is we use lots of different avenues to build relationships. You know, we ask for referrals. There are loads of instances where lawyers will move from a client to another law firm that doesn't use Definely, and honestly, they've demanded that they will not be working on a contract without Definely. Obviously, depending on how senior they are as a lawyer, will that make any change? And it's our job to present back to the client as to, look, this is why it works. This is why it is a good idea. Happy for you to lead those internal comms. You know, we have to have a process that is set and best practice, but naturally every client is going to have, you know, different flavors of how they want this process to work. And you can still, you know, achieve those things. But again, it's about, because 9 times out of 10, the reason the client doesn't want the vendor to approach the lawyers is because they see it as, can they get this deal done quick, fast, and dirty? And, you know, obviously lawyers have a responsibility around billables and all that kind of stuff. But actually, when you find those lawyers that have been fed up with doing something a specific way for the past 20 years because Microsoft Word has not been developed in any ingenious way for lawyers over that period of time, it's about finding those nuggets and then using those nuggets in a way that the client respects. I think that's kind of my high level answer to that. Thanks,
Nathan. So given the timing, and actually it's perfect because one of the questions that come in was going to be the next topic that we do. So I think we'll move to Q&A with the first question being around sort of future roadmap and actually thinking about, you know, you're thinking about a solution now and you're assessing a solution now, but you're obviously hoping that there's a commitment from the vendor to continue to innovate and to continue to grow alongside you as a firm. One of the questions from the attendees is, how important is the vendor's long-term vision and the product the product roadmap in the vendor selection process. Maybe starting with you, Andrei, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think the first sign of that is if the vendor is interested in your feedback. I think that's and there's different degrees to that. Obviously, everyone can say, yes, of course, we value your feedback, but then not really listen or not really show that they're really caring about that feedback and really trying to implement that. So I think that becomes quite obvious quite early, and then we're back to that trust and to the relationship. So I think those signs are pretty clear early on. We are super hands-on with these things. We really like to deliver a lot of feedback. I think it needs to go both ways. You cannot expect a super fancy development that for some magical reason really applies to everything your wishes if you don't put in the effort and put in the time to deliver that feedback, right? And you need to take that feedback internally from those users. I mean, Nathan, you were just addressing, right, the relationship directly to users also at the beginning. I think even afterwards, and it's always hard to find that balance, right? And especially with feedback after a successful deployment and when the solution is working fine, I think you lose a bit of that contact anyways, or it's even more difficult to get in touch with the actual users and get their feedback, right? So I think a lot of the firms have processes for that internally, but I think it's up to us as a legal team, legal tech team, obviously, to recognize that feedback, to give ideas, and we're super. I mean, I think you to the ones of you that know me in this call, you know, I'm the first one to give feedback, and I'm the first one to say, okay, let's get in touch with your tech team. I have cool ideas, and I understand that obviously not always you can implement these ideas straight away. And David, you mentioned it at the beginning, right? As the more clients you have, the more established you are as a solution provider, right? It's hard you have sometimes really cool ideas going in from two different clients that are quite conflicting in terms of developing your product further, right? So it's not always easy. I understand that, but I think for me it's super important to notice that you really put in a lot of effort and resources into developing your product further. Yeah, that's the prerequisite, I guess, for a successful relationship there.
Jonathan?
Yeah, so echoing the words of Andrei there. So it's indeed about the trust. It's a sign of maturity if you have a proper roadmap. At the same time, we in co-creation with our vendors see that it's about bringing value immediately. So the roadmap is a good thing because you see that if the vendors do something with feedback, are open for feedback, they have a vision, and at the same time it's about the here and now and how a solution brings value right away to our firm. So it works both ways. So it's good to have a dialogue on your journey together. But it should be not about expectation of what a solution could deliver, but what the solution delivers in the here and now. So that's where we try to put the most focus on. We give our feedback back to our vendors, and sometimes you see our feedback in the roadmap, sometimes of course not, because it's we're not the only ones giving feedback, Andrei, and at the same time it helps creating the connection and the trust between our firm and the vendors we work together with. Thanks, Jonathan. So
we are going to touch on some lessons learned from generative AI. I think no webinar at the moment is possible without discussing the topic, but there are a number of questions. So I think we're just going to go through a few of those, some really great ones there. So please do keep submitting any further questions that you have. I think one really great one that I'd love to touch on, we know lawyers are by their nature, perfectionists, they want to deliver the best possible advice and do things, and it's the way that they're trained within a firm as well. One of the questions is, how do you persuade your internal clients, so your lawyers, that sometimes good is good enough, in terms of, you can get 80% of the way there with, a piece of technology, versus their natural desire for perfection. Any tips from, we'll again start with maybe Jonathan, we'll go straight back to you for that to start with, but be interesting to get a vendor perspective on that as well. I think we've all come across that.
Yeah, so persuading is I think something which is difficult, because if you need to sell a technology to your audience, the question is, does it really fit the needs? So it's about the why behind the persuading, which is something to dive into. So if that why leads to that for example, when in our 3-stage innovation process, when we launch, we look at the willingness, the ability, and the readiness of our teams. If it's something there, yeah, of course, good is good enough. And we need to be conscious of the fact that sometimes in a persuading, so the 20% of the 80 could really help you removing the needle and maybe find the sweet spot in implementing a technology. So it's it's a balance, finding the right balance there for us as a firm.
Andrei?
Through a lot of sweat and tears. No, but I fully agree with Jonathan. I think persuading, in theory, persuading shouldn't be the right word, right? It should be a solution, and it should be about the pain point, and it should sell. So I fully agree on that in theory. I think in practice, I do notice that with a lot of our legal professionals and a lot of particular solutions. Yes, that's very true, and that's a very good question. You always, the solution might improve your workflow, I don't know, 60, 80%, even, I mean, we're talking about the 80%, even 40% in a super, I mean, you need to, first of all, go back and think a bit that even though, you hear this quite often, and yes, innovation in law firms and so on and so forth is hard, and a lot of them are still working super old school and manual, but these work, I mean, at the core of our profession is being efficient, right, for the client, right, and being efficient, to have more time, to build more time, and so on and so forth. So I think the workflows, even though a lot of times manual, I think people with all this tech discussion oversee that they are in their core quite efficient in the first place, right? So what I'm trying to say is, even coming with a tool that maybe improves of workflow 30 or 40%, that is quite efficient in the first place, might still be, depending on the situation, a huge asset. On the other hand, I really can confirm from our experience that doesn't matter how perfect the solution is, you always manage with our legal teams to find that, I don't know, 5% or that one feature that doesn't work, and that always comes up as an argument for why we shouldn't adopt this solution. And I think obviously you need to approach that. I think you need to be transparent about that, but I think that's the nature of the game. I think lawyers think that way, and I think you need to navigate with that or past that or together on that topic, and then be transparent, be honest, and say, okay, let's start, but with the improvements here, and try to build on what's not working.
Thanks, Andrei. So I might just move on to another question in the interest of time. So we've got one here saying, in terms of day-to-day practices, how do you work closely with legal tech teams? So do they join in on the matters by default, or do they fit physically near the lawyers? So I think what I'm understanding from that is how closely do the end users and the legal tech teams work sort of very collaboratively, almost side by side with each other? What have you seen work? Maybe Andrei, do you want to take that one to start with?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's always I think you need to work. I mean, for us as a legal tech team, I think we need to. You need a super good cooperation there. You need cooperation with the vendors. You need to stay in touch. You need to give feedback and discuss features. And you need internally to really know the pain points of the business. I think it's never you're never successful or done with an implementation, right? We discussed. I mean, you want to develop it further. You want to push it further. So I think you really need to take the time and stick to it. There's also always new use cases, right? I mean, even Jonathan, you mentioned it very well, right? I mean, it should bring an improvement in the now and in the moment. But where, for example, we have you, Daniel, here for transaction management. We have new use cases popping up every day in Legatics, and we're saying, oh, okay, this is completely new. It would be nice to have these features, but this wasn't the use case that we at the beginning, or it wasn't our core use case that we brought in the solution for, right? That was maybe banking, finance transactions, and M&A deals and whatever. And all of a sudden we have an overview in the platform that requires maybe a bit of different drop downs or whatever. It can become super technical, but I think it always evolves, and I think that's important. So yeah, we have a lot of different venues internally. We have a lot of one-to-one discussions. I think you need to stay close to your teams and the business to be able to support that relationship.
That's great, Jonathan.
Yeah, we do it in co-creation with our practices. So, and it really depends on the technology where we are closer and where we can be further away. We have super users depending on the technology. And the subject that technology is, or the business process that technology is serving. It helps us as well being close to the business process, since the legal tech team is the bridge to the vendor. So having us a deep understanding on how the technology is deployed makes us do our job better for our clients, for the end users, being clients externally or internally. So it's really about being close and a deep understanding what is possible with the specific technology in itself. Of course, the maturity of the technology is shown by the way we could be as far away of that specific technology. So if you need to do a lot of assistance, if you need to give a lot of guidance, that's for us a sign to give that back to our vendors, to make sure that that's not necessary, because it could sometimes easily be removed, those pain points. Yeah.
Thanks, Jonathan. So I'm going to just turn over to David and to Nathan, and we've just got a few minutes remaining, but I do want to touch on the generative AI point very briefly. And I think, we know that there's a lot of buzz around this. It does feel different to the buzz that's been around a lot of other technology that's been coming in. There's a lot of experimentation that's going on. What do you think we can maybe learn from prior experiences with legal tech in terms of how to navigate what's going on at the moment with generative AI? Maybe David, do you have some initial thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, as a tech provider, we've actually purposely stayed away from lots of the hype trains over the last kind of 5 to 10 years. Kind of be doing it 6 or 7 years now, because they just haven't really yielded results. I would genuinely say though that some of the stuff we're seeing at the moment that we're able to do with generative AI is pretty incredible, to be honest. But I still think even within that, it's about knowing its limitations. So it's no good just sprinkling saying we've got this. We need to be really clear about what it can be used for and what it can't be used for. Particularly in our realm of, I'm sure Nathan will come on to in a second, drafting contracts and things like that. When it comes to can it mark it up for me and all this kind of stuff. If you give it a really simple example and ask it to change the governing law for you, it'll probably change English to French, so would find and replace. But it can do some really impressive things. So we're just at the moment trying to make sure that we just use it in really specific areas that it genuinely is useful for, and just be really clear that, look, this is still experimental, it's still really new, it can be really good, but you've got to be so perfect with your contracts and what you're doing that you don't always rely on it. You use it where it's good, and don't again try and overpromise.
Thanks, David. Just in the interest of time, I might just get one law firm perspective. Whoever's in first, Andrei, Jonathan, what's your take on it? What lessons?
It's a hot topic. I think you need to give us 2 seconds to both of us. No, I will very quickly. Super example. I mean, David, huge hype train. I think the technology is very important in particular areas, and if they really solve a pain point and use case, I think it's super valuable. I think the approach that a lot are doing at the moment, we see a lot changing that approach, throwing one big language model or one solution at every use case will not work in the not even the midterm. So I think that is quite clear for us at least. But you hear David, super particular example for your area, right? Oh, okay, generative AI document automation is gone. It will be, it's completely obsolete. No, I mean, do you want to generate a different template every time and a different? So I think document automation is super valuable and will stay the way it is. But I think you will be able to automate your templates, so really do the automation per se, I think a lot faster with supported by AI. So it's typical example of where people are completely discussing on the wrong end of the technology, right? And saying, okay, it will just boost a lot of areas or support a lot of areas. Obviously, like you said, with being very careful of how you use it and being aware of its limitations. So I think super exciting times, but I think you need to approach it in a sustainable way and not jump on the hype train.
Yeah, definitely a whole webinar topic in and of itself, and I know so many other webinars are focused purely on that at the moment. So we did manage to get to basically the end of the webinar without diving too deep, but really fascinating.
I think
so
we went 24 minutes without mentioning AI. I think it was 24 minutes in, wasn't it?
So just wanted to say a huge thank you to everyone for attending today, and particularly to today's panelists. Hopefully the discussions provided some food for thought when it comes to assessing new legal tech solutions for your firm and how you can set your firm up for success when deploying new technology. A recording of today's webinar will be sent to everyone who registered for the webinar. And just to note, we'll also be shortly releasing an ebook on the topic, which can serve as a further useful guide. So if you don't already, please do follow Legatics on LinkedIn to get details of when that will be released. And yeah, you'll have the ability to go and get access to that. And yeah, just have a fantastic rest of your day and hope to see you at future Legatics events. All the best.
So, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Cheers.
Bye.